Okay.
Keeping track of what you're asking.
Bishop, we're actually playing solitaire.
We are all. I just was like,
I thought you were working. You're supposed to be keeping track of the questions so that we know. This will be for the outtake gag reel.
box scores down in Florida.
Yeah, we're filling out our brackets.
Oh, you filling out your brackets? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Bishop Young.
Okay. Yes.
What are your earliest recollections of the General? How old were you, and what do you remember of your first General Conference?
My. The first General Conference that I was privileged to be a part of was in 1968. I went to the General Conference in 1968 as the connectional president of the Richard Allen Youth Council, and had the opportunity to be in Philadelphia. I shared a room with William Watley. He was the connectional YPD president, and the late Bishop Vernon Byrd organized our housing in the members' house because he was pastoring at that time in Camden, New Jersey, and I think he made provisions for our housing. We were there for youth involvement. That was my first General Conference. What happened significantly in 1968 at the General Conference in Philadelphia was the church changed the age for being delegates, changed the age for being trustees and stewards in the life of the local church to make certain that persons who were under 21 would be eligible to be elected and to serve in that capacity. In some instances, the 21 was still required for being a trustee, but they did lower the age for being stewards in anticipation that we would, in my opinion, come back to the General Conference in 1972 with some planned inclusion for young adults, which we call young people, in the life of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. In 1964, I was a staff member of Big Bethel AME Church's staff. I was a student at Marsh Brown College, and that was the General Conference where I had the opportunity, because H.I. Bearden, along with Harrison Bryant, I was on staff at Big Bethel. H.I. Bearden, the late Bishop Bearden, was my father in the ministry. And so that was the Mother's Day. That's when they held elections. So on Mother's Day, I was the preacher at Big Bethel. I think I was 19 years old then. I was the preacher at Big Bethel Church for that Sunday morning. And it was a live radio broadcast, and to have that honor and privilege. But he was at the General Conference. That was also the General Conference where Dr. King addressed the General Conference, and I still remember hearing that long-playing LP of Dr. King's address to the General Conference, Sleeping Through a Revolution. Bishop Frederick Calhoun James presented him, and it was a stirring. It is still an inspiring message if you hear it even today. So working with the late Dr. Andrew White, who was then the General Secretary of the Department of Christian Education, we passed the legislation which changed the date of the General Conference and also changed the age of persons who would be officers in a local church, lowering it so that young adults would be able to serve in that capacity.
How hard was it for this youth revolution to take place in the General Conference?
Very challenging when we arrived at the General, but that was a lot of work we did on the way. It started in 1970, between 66 and 70, and then between 70 and 74. It started in that period where a group of young adults began to meet around the country to talk about how we would include young adults in the life of the church. It had always been a dream of mine that we would have some designated category for young people to be a part of it, and I thought it was vital. The youth nights at the annual conference were fine, but I thought we were bigger than that and had a larger capacity than that. And so with young people from all over the connection, and we held a lot of our meetings in Philadelphia. The late Dorothy Jenkins and Robina Castleberry and Dorothy Jenkins. They were members of the church in Philadelphia. I'll tell you the name of it in just a moment, where they were members of that church. And they were our the late Reverend Smallwood, who was the director of Christian education, a group of them, they were our advisors. They were persons who were comfortable with themselves, loved the church enough with their colleagues to be able to stand on the outside, listen to us argue and debate. They could provide the resources we needed to have the meetings, to provide sites for retreats, and to kind of be our parents who allowed us to be adults in the room. And that memories are sacred even now for me, because they were not compensated to do that. They were not salary persons, but out of their love for the church, they were involved. So we had these long debates and discussions and conversations and said, how do we do this? And we put together a proposal with the help of several ministers and lay people about how to include young adults in the life of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And so in order to make it happen, though, we had to appeal to the bishops of the church. We went to the Bishops' Council in Birmingham. We were just talking about it a little while in the room. And asked the bishops if they would send at least 2 observers from each Episcopal district to the General Conference, and they would be seated as observers, but they'd be able to share in the proceedings and participate in the process that way. No vote, just to be able to be present. As a connectional president of the RAYC, I had a vote, and then Dr. Watley had a vote as a connectional YPD, and that was a part of the legislation we did in 1968. It was challenging, exciting, but for me, it took on special meaning. The late Dr. H.C. Coswell, who was an institution in Georgia, the young people were seated in the balcony, the observers, and Dr. Coswell said, I understand that McKinley Young and the young people, he called him, he could do a job with my name, McKinley Young and the young people, up in the balcony. Richard Allen took us out of the balcony to bring us on the main floor, and I think we ought to bring the young people down on the floor as members of the General Conference. Now, he was sightless at the time, very aged, but obviously a person of enormous vision and capacity. So it was at that General Conference that we had the opportunity to present the legislation. First, it was for one, and for every 4 delegates elected by an annual conference, there shall be 1 young adult delegate. And it was changed. We changed it. We modified it because that was going to take the numbers up too high.
How important is the sidewalk? Because as you're talking about you and the other young adults having conversation and so forth, how important is the sidewalk to the work of the General Conference?
It's a vetting process. It's a stakeholders clearinghouse. It's an opportunity to have a variety of perspectives. It's what I would call the chemistry of collaboration and conversation. It's very important because what you want to have is you want to have all of the generations of membership to be in conversation about how the church takes shape and moves forward. We want all of them to be able to claim their part in the church's vision and ministry. We want all of them to share responsibility in underwriting, sustaining, and taking the church forward. So the only way you can have that buy-in is you must give them an opportunity to have input. And that's what happened with us. We had such a large variety. And then we had the participation of Russell Brown, Harvey Walden, the old sages, to be able to say the young people are really having some deep and serious conversations and discussions about the church and about the life of the church and their involvement in it. And if you give them that opportunity to share that forum, then I believe that they will change our future.
You are now...
I'm going to interrupt. I'm sorry. Bishop, try to remember to incorporate the question in
Right.
the answer so we know what the topic is.
Got you.
So
Okay.
if you would just say, that's how important the sidewalk is to
Right.
the general.
Okay.
You
Right.
say that, then he'll incorporate.
Right. Okay, I got you. That's how important the sidewalk is to what happens in our church. Vital, essential, essential, necessary.
The relationship between the sidewalk to the General Conference, what is that relationship to convo? And you brought convo to the AME Church.
Well, I think it's essential to the life of the church. And I can't take credit for Convo. Convo started with Bishop Adams and Bishop Brookins and Bishop Anderson. And what I did was I was excited about it and wanted to walk along the path and to be one of the participants in it. And for me, the Convo provided an opportunity for the people of the church, clergy and lay, old and young, all of the generations, all of the people insiders, outsiders, persons who were excited and persons who were perhaps a bit skeptical about what we were going to do. That gave them an opportunity to share conversation, to talk about the issues that concerned them, to raise their concerns, to argue their issues, and to believe that they would be heard. And so it became a clearinghouse for the work of the General Conference. The convos gave us an opportunity, somebody said, to share frustrations, to talk about dreams, to talk about aspirations, and then to make certain that so that everybody could say, we really have been heard. And so it's essential. That's the Sidewalk. And so that was a creative way, bringing the Sidewalk into conversation with the people who were in places of leadership and with the governance of the church.
You're now on the other side of the fence. In 1972, pushing for inclusion of young people, trying to convince the status quo that a change needs to take place. And now you are a part of the status quo, consecrated to maintain order and to be sure nothing strange comes in. How does that feel?
Oh, it's a different feeling altogether to be on the other side of the table. I used it a lot when I was elected the bishop to talk about the Board of Examiners. In addition to the work with the young people, one of the most exciting responsibilities I had was to serve as the Dean of the Board of Examiners for the Chicago Annual Conference. The late Bishop H.N. Robinson gave me that responsibility. I loved it. I loved the idea of addressing the issues of ministry. Bishop Talbot became the president of the council, and we agreed that we were going to have a convocational ministry in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. We're going to redo all of the facets of Section 7 in the old discipline and create diverse forms of ministry and all of that, have those kinds of conversations and discussions. So I relished that and was excited about it. And so I said to the pastors now, at one time I was on the other side of the table making the report to the bishop, and now I'm on this side of the table receiving the report from the chairs. Quite a different experience, but I still have the excitement and the enthusiasm to see people coming for ministry, to see people being presented by the Board of Examiners, to hear their conversations, to ask them some of the questions that the bishop asked me, to watch their expressions on their faces, to ask them about books they're reading in seminary. It's not exciting. And the same thing holds for the work that we're trying to do with the inclusion of all of the people into the life of the church. Having the young people now, those persons are the senior members of the African Methodist Episcopal Church now in so many capacities, in the lay organization, the Women's Missionary Society, and to be able to have the opportunity to engage them and to know that we have begun this journey which now continues.
I need a moment. I have to come.
Start back in.
There have been significant general conferences where legislation or events or things have been done that have changed the course of the denomination for generations to come. Do any of them come to mind to you now?
I think the 1976 General Conference, we attempted to present to the church a proposal to create one youth organization in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. That debate and conversation we needed to have. The church didn't adopt the proposal, but what it did, it gave me the opportunity to see how the process really works. And it helped me to understand something very critical in the life of the church, and that you have to be able to hear the church's no in order to embrace the church's yes. If you can't accept that, then you will not be able to serve the church because it will say no as well as it can say yes. So for me, that was in '76. I found that to be a great time. I remember Richard Nixon's brother being turned away from the General Conference in 1972 because I was there at that time. I remember the presence of President Clinton coming to the General Conference in 1992. He had just visited Big Bethel Church a few weeks before the General Conference and had stood outside with me shaking hands with the members as they were leaving. So that General Conference was very special. It was also the General Conference in 1992 where I had the chance to be elected for service. But I think one of the most exciting General Conferences was in 1980 when the General Conference, with all of its work, elected only two bishops. And the two bishops who were elected, James Haskell Mayo, elected the 100th bishop, John Ellsworth Hunter, elected the 101st bishop, both came from the 4th Episcopal District. Bishop Hunter had suffered a massive heart attack and was somewhat challenged health-wise. And so I was his campaign manager. I traveled all over the place making campaign speeches for him, and I was his legs and presence in many respects. And after Bishop Mill was elected, we said, well, there's no chance that John Hull would get. But John Hull was elected that same General Conference. That was exciting to me because it showed me that the church has a heart and a compassion for leadership. And each General Conference is its own creation, its own creature, its own autonomy. It can do many, many wonderful things. So I found that exciting. So it helped to prepare me along the way to get ready. Jesse Jackson came to the General Conference in 1988 and raised a significant sum of money. I think we gave him a significant sum, over $100,000 that was raised that night for his presidential campaign. I was not a delegate or a member of that General Conference, but I did have the opportunity to stand and say that I had $1,000 from Big Bethel Church. Jesse Hill, who was one of the officers of Big Bethel, helped to make those resources available and made it possible for me to be able to go up on the platform and say that that was a gift we were giving for the campaign of Jesse Jackson to be president. President Clinton came in 1972, 1992. And so I was pleased about that, pleased about what we were able to do. I was also pleased that I got elected a bishop and was assigned to the 15th Episcopal District. I was excited about the way it happened. I never dreamed or imagined that I would leave the General Conference in 1992 as a bishop in our church. But by the grace of God and the kindness of the people, I was given the opportunity to serve. And I was just thrilled beyond words. Bishop Bearden had been elected. It had been 28 years since someone had been elected. There are only two bishops, or three now, who were elected from the pulpit of Big Bethel Church: H.I. Bearden, McKinley Young, and James Davis. And so there have been many who served the church and went on elsewhere. So I was honored by that. I was pleased that we were able to pass the legislation to create the strategic planning, of which you and I, along with Garnet Henry, were able to be a part of that. The core strategic planning for the church, and to give the church a chance to deal with and address all of the opportunities, the threats that we face, the opportunities that are provided, the chances that are ours and to see the people engage in that and to hear the enthusiasm that was being uttered all around the country. That was so all over the connection. I was so very, very special. So I've been very excited about those moments, to be a part of legislation, to preside in the General Conference and to participate in the conversations that take place, to represent the denomination in other settings with the World Council of Churches, while I served as the ecumenical officer and with the World Methodist Council. So all of those have been instances where I've had the chance to see the church's promise. And in each instance, I've had a chance to see what the inclusion and involvement of young people has meant for us. It has changed the whole dynamic. It's been a game changer for us.
You have been program chair for the General Conference.
Right.
Although this is an administrative meeting, how important are our worship services to the life of the General Conference?
I think worship services are vital because they become the models. They become the real par excellence examples of how you do worship and what happens. I was pleased to serve with Bishop Anderson in that capacity. He was chair of worship. I was the co-chair of worship and liturgy for the church, along with he and Bishop Tom. I was also happy to be with that because if you remember, as we got ready for the bicentennial, we did the bicentennial hymn book and the bicentennial book of worship. I was a part of that group. That was a different kind of experience for us to go through the hymn books and pull out all the liturgical expressions, to write some of the liturgies that's there regarding dedications. All of that, I had a chance to be a part of all that, along with the late Bishop Ming and Mrs. Ming and the Campbells, who were a part of that experience. Such a thrilling experience. It was a learning experience. Bishop Robinson placed me on that committee, and I was pleased to be able to serve. So to be able to have the opportunity to be program chair while you served as the chair of the General Conference Commission, and it was in St. Louis, where I was yesterday visiting Bishop Chappelle, that we had the opportunity to witness first an all-inclusive book of worship that had all of the liturgy in place, and to see how we were able to organize our time and structure and work of the General Conference so that we could get finished in that time, and then to be able to receive the Honorable Barack Obama, Senator of Illinois, now 44th President of the United States, that he came to the General Conference, and to think that we had a hand in that, could participate in that, and for that very timely address to have taken place in real time while we were providing leadership is humbling and exciting.
You have served on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. What do you think about the future of global ministry for the AME Church?
I thought that Bishop Talbot and Bishop and Mrs. Talbot, Bishop and Mrs. Ming, Bishop Robinson, I remember, the Mings especially were able to help capture the song and the music and the spirit of our people in the districts 14 and higher. I think that's our future. We are a part of the diaspora. There are people who our cousins, our brothers and sisters, that we did not grow up with. We have the opportunity to interact with them and to learn from them, and them to learn from us. The African Methodist Episcopal Church, when John Bryant served as the president of the council, gave $100,000 to be shared in South Africa between the 19th, where Bishop Sonatley served, and the 15th, where I served, to help in the elections of 1994. Forums, crusades, youth gatherings, rallies, all of those, providing transportation, voter education, voter mobilization, teach-ins, all that happened with those funds and resources. We had a rally for young people, and the speaker was we were in Cape Town, and the speaker was Jamal Bryant. So all of those things happened because the African Methodist Episcopal Church invested in the election. Not only that, we learned that so many of the people who were elected and who served as electors in the election were members of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. The reason why they were is because our church always held elections. And the people said, I learned how to do this by being a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So I think that rather than them learning from us, we learn from them. I love that music. I love the song. I love the way they understand the theology of African Methodism in a big way. I love what it represents when we see a new South Africa emerge. And we also saw a new Namibia come into being as well. All of that, and since I had the opportunity to serve as the Bishop of Namibia, Angola, and the southern part of the Republic of South Africa, it was rich and vital. So I think those are ties, connections, linkages that should be strengthened and enlarged, never diminished, because I think it's a mutual learning experience. You
provide leadership for SATA. What is SATA, and what is the significance of SATA to the AME Church?
The SATA, AME SATA, is the arm of international development for the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Through the U.S. government, we were able to receive funds and resources from USAID to provide housing, to provide health, education, and other opportunities, educational opportunities for young people and the peoples of Haiti, and also Southern Africa, and South Africa in particular, with the building of Wilberforce University, with the Hildebrand Clinic in Haiti. The Women's Missionary Society right now from the 11th District is about to build a birth house, help in the building of a birth house for at-risk women. And we're going to go in April to witness the groundbreaking for that. SATA is our arm to say that we will have presence in the places where people need our help in order to help themselves to be empowered and to change the socio-political realities that they face. And to be able to be a part of that, to participate in that, and to see that happening in real time is most exciting. To walk on the campus of Wilberforce Community College in Everton, South Africa, on ground that the African Methodist Episcopal Church has owned since the days preceding apartheid, that's all encouraging. The Josephus Roosevelt Cohen Distance Learning Center, which I had the opportunity to share in its dedication. All are vital, and the work that goes on in all the places. You served in the 18th Episcopal District, and you know how vitally important that was. I love those connections. It's not just the songs and the music, but it's the service, it's the people, it's the talent, the gifts that are ours to share and to be a part of.
All right, last question, unless I missed something.
No, you did all of them, actually.
Okay. What are your hopes and dreams for the AME Church?
Hopes and dreams for the African Methodist Episcopal Church. I chair the Commission on Annuity Investment and Insurance. We will bring to this General Conference after a feasibility study and a business plan that's been developed by one of our members who happens to be a layperson, a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church who was willing to invest over $350,000 of his own money to help make certain that we would be able to bring into reality a captive insurance program for the African Methodist Episcopal, an insurance company that we will own that will help us to underwrite and to further implement the dreams and the visions which were worked out in our strategic plan for the African Methodist Episcopal Church. I'm excited about the future and what that holds. When I think about the annuity and investment and insurance program, I think that when we get to the General Conference in a few months, we will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million. That's remarkable. Very close to it. That's remarkable for a church of people. I think about that. I think about the place that I serve in the 11th Episcopal District. I chair the Board of Trustees for Everett Waters College, fully accredited institution under the auspices of the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. The 11th District raised $2 million and gave to the school as a way, in addition to the $1 million we give each year from the denomination, in order to help make certain that there was no indebtedness and no deficit, we placed the school on solid ground. So I'm excited because all around I meet people, pastors, ministers, lay people, simple people, trusting people, caring people, loving people, sacrificing people. They are the people that make the African Methodist Episcopal Church unique, whether on this side of the pond, on this side of the Atlantic, on another side of the Atlantic. They are the people who help us to know that there is a richness, a vitality, a quality of faith and commitment that knows no historical limitations and knows no geographical boundaries. It's the spirit of the free African society manifested in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, of which I'm pleased to be a part of.
That was a great quote.
Good. Marvelous. Yay. Thank you. Don't stand up too late.
Okay.